The observation begins. The observation deck of the Centauri ship floated silently above Earth's upper orbit, hidden behind a cloaking veil made from star-threaded tech so advanced even human satellites could not detect it inside the command room stood Saraxa, a highly ranked biologist of the Centauri. Intelligence cast, her skin shimmered with a soft violet hue, and her eyes pulsed with neon blue rings, shifting rapidly as data streamed through her retina. Her target was Earth. Her subject was human behavior, and her primary question had now become an obsession. She stood before a floating panel showing live feeds of a particular human male named Drayan Cross, aged 32, occupation planetary, scientist, occupation irrelevant, mating status active, extremely active, data inconsistent with biological limits for the last 16 Earth days. Saraxa had silently recorded his movements, interactions, and biological patterns. She expected to find weakness, she expected instability, but what she observed defied every Centauri understanding of humanoid endurance based on her reports. Drayan had been involved in mating activity nearly every single day and showed no signs of physical collapse or reproductive failure. This was not biologically sound, not in any known species, even among Centauri, who reproduced through plasma bond rituals once every 5 cycles. Such frequency would cause neurological burnout, skeletal strain, or complete systemic rupture. Yet here this human stood walking through his city with energy, skin flushed with healthy warmth, no signs of internal damage. She zoomed into his vital scans with disbelief. Heart rate steady, nervous system calm, pheromone levels strong, even elevated from prior cycles. She replayed a feed from the previous night where Drayan returned home with a female companion and initiated contact again and again and again. His laughter, his boldness, his control, his recovery, it shattered all scientific expectation. One of the observation drones buzzed softly beside her shoulder as it transmitted fresh reports. Sarax's long fingers tapped the control glyphs, and she stared at the numbers, unable to understand how this species had evolved. Such madness, or maybe brilliance, she did not know yet, but her fascination was growing. In the outer chamber of the ship, her assistant, Yehok, entered holding a scroll pad of data with clear discomfort across his silken face. "This is now beyond study," he said softly. "It is becoming an existential question if their species can maintain this level of reproductive output over extended periods. They may be on the path toward a genetic singularity." Zorax nodded, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She was not only observing anymore, she was becoming involved, connected to this question, to this man, to this enigma that Earth had hidden under a layer of chaos and simplicity. "We need to see more," she said quietly. "I must go down among them. I must see how they speak, how they connect, how their instincts can survive such sustained intensity without collapse." Hawk stepped back in alarm. Entering a human form is high risk. Their social behavior is unpredictable. You could be compromised. Her X's glowing eyes narrowed. Risk is required if truth is to be understood. And then she turned, activating the shapeshift module that wrapped her alien form in the precise mimicry of a human female. Her height shrank slightly, her glow faded into warm skin tone, her limbs matched perfect bone and muscle density. Of Earth origin, clothing materialized from memory scans, a blend of human comfort and cultural blending. She took her first breath in her new form. It felt dense, strange, rich, full of weight and taste and sensation. Her mind flared with new receptors, detecting oxygen levels, wind pressure, gravity shift, even the smell of surrounding. "Oi, prepare the descent pod," she commanded, and moments later, a silver capsule detached from the hidden ship and streaked through the night sky like a falling star, aimed toward the city where Drayan lived. Unaware, back on Earth, Drayan sat at a small cafe, sipping dark coffee while tapping a few notes into his datapad. He was alone for the first time in several days, and his mind finally had space to breathe. He had always felt a strange pressure in his life, as if something somewhere was watching, but he chalked it up to the stress of being in demand. Both professionally and romantically, he felt no different than anyone else. Sure, he was more active than most, maybe more energetic, maybe more curious, maybe more intense, but that was just who he was. He looked up and saw a woman walking down the sidewalk in his direction. There was something different about her, not in how she looked, but in how she moved, as if each step was calculated, as if her senses were drinking in the world for the first time. Zorexa walked with precise grace, her eyes scanning her surroundings while trying not to show it, her neural translator working overtime to adapt to the language patterns and emotional signals flooding her new body. When her gaze met Drayan's, she felt something strange, not data, not code, not analysis, but warmth, interest, and something like recognition there. Eyes locked for just a second, and the question pulsed in her mind like an echo through her blood. How do you not break hand? In that moment something began, something far beyond science. The first encounter. The streets were alive with motion and scent and sound. Human voices rose and fell in waves. Mechanical transports rolled across shimmering pavement, and neon signs flickered softly above food stalls where sweet and spicy air drifted through the crowd. Sarixa walked through all of it, absorbing the chaos with the quiet mind of a trained observer. Her new human form responded to everything, wind brushing against her synthetic skin, heart beating with a rhythm she had never known, and somewhere deep inside, a strange flutter she could not yet explain. Drayan stood by the edge of the park reading something on his wrist display, but his attention kept drifting back to the woman she had passed him once, with eyes like burning amber, and a presence so calm it unsettled him now. She had stopped at a nearby vendor, pretending to study the items, but her posture and her stillness told him something else. He had studied people long enough to see the signs. He walked over, slowly, casual but curious. The stranger turned before he spoke, her expression unreadable and yet familiar. Somehow, do I know you? He asked lightly, offering a polite smile. Sarixa tilted her head slightly, accessing dozens of human speech patterns before responding. I do not believe so, but I am new here, and perhaps our paths crossed in thought, if not time. Her voice was smooth, carefully modulated, but there was something under it, something sharp. Drayan laughed quietly, a rare sound, not from amusement, but from the way her sentence landed like a puzzle with meaning buried under elegance. You, a poet or a scientist? He asked. Took a moment to answer. She had practiced a cover story, one that matched her appearance and her interest in him. I studied biology across cultural zones. I travel between regions and observe physiological behavior patterns in developing ecosystems. Drayan raised his eyebrows with interest. Sounds like we might share some ground. I'm in planetary science, mostly focused on adaptive environments and energy exchange, especially in densely populated zones there. Conversation flowed like water, but underneath it, Sarixa was collecting data on every micro-expression, every eye flick and tone shift. Her sensors picked up his rising heart rate, but it remained stable and confident. His scent indicated calm interest, no fear, no guarded aggression. She invited him to join her for a walk through the city trails, and he agreed without hesitation, as if something in her presence pulled him forward. They walked for an hour, sharing thoughts on natural evolution, population, stress responses, and human endurance, but neither of them mentioned the deeper topic sitting between their words, the topic of connection, the question of intimacy. The mystery of how humans could maintain such intense physical engagement over extended periods without collapse. Sarixa was observing every movement, his stride, his breathing, his temperature, his spontaneous humor that seemed to spring from nowhere, and his willingness to meet her gaze directly without submission or challenge. She had seen countless mating rituals from dozens of species across the known galaxy, and none of them matched what she felt rising in her. Now this was not analysis anymore. This was response. Drayan finally paused as they reached a quiet corner near a river park, glowing lights reflecting on the water. He turned to face her and said something unexpected. You look like someone who has never been on Earth before, but you're trying really hard to look like you have. A Sarixa froze, her neural net scrambled to recover. That's not an insult, he added quickly. It's just the way you look at things, the way you breathe, like you're measuring everything around you, as if the world might vanish any moment and you need to record it before it does. For the first time, Sarixa felt her posture falter, not from threat but from realization. This man was seeing beyond the face, beyond the mask. You are very observant, she replied. It's my job, he said with a soft grin, and then there was silence, not awkward, not empty, but full, like two mirrors facing each other. She reached out suddenly and touched his hand lightly, only for a second, just to feel the connection, the pulse, the texture, and the warmth. He did not pull away, and the sensors in her fingertips lit up with readings she could barely believe: vascular density, neuron response, heat level, all elevated but controlled. He was completely in control of his body, even while displaying interest that would send most species into overload. She whispered to herself without knowing her translator was still active. How do you not burn out? How do you stay whole? Drayan leaned in and asked softly, what did you say? She blinked, recalibrated, and smiled slightly. Something I must study further. The night ended, with no numbers exchanged, no promises made, but something had begun that neither of them could name, something deeper than science, more ancient than data. Aboard the Xanthari ship, Yok watched the feed and spoke into the command relay with, "Alarm, subject has made contact, unexpected emotional fluctuation. Detected primary agent showing signs of imprinting. Command responded with cold precision, increase surveillance and prepare containment if required. This cannot escalate," but it had already begun, and the question now was not, how do humans survive their desires, but what happens when someone from the stars begins to feel one's secrets. Of the human, Bava Sorexa stood alone in the lower chamber of her observation ship, her artificial skin fading back into violet shimmer, her body glowing faintly as the data stream unfolded around her. She had scanned many species in her time, some ancient, some advanced, some extinct, but none like this, not like the human male she had touched. The scan replayed, in slow streams, showing wave after wave of internal responses from Drayon cross muscle fiber, with regeneration speed outside expected limits. Hormone spikes regulated without medical interference, heart function optimized for both calm and exertion, brain activity balanced across multiple regions. Even during physical peak, it made no sense. The human nervous system should not be able to sustain that kind of mating frequency without suffering structural damage, adrenal burnout, or even mental collapse. Yet he remained stable, consistent. Even joyful Sorexa watched the pulse graph from the touch she had shared with him earlier. That day, the simple contact of their hands had triggered a full response in her own system, a reaction not programmed, not trained, not expected. It was supposed to be an external study, but now it had turned inward. She stepped toward the genetic matrix panel and ordered a deep molecular cross-analysis between Drayan scan and Xanthari databases. What returned caused her to pause for the first time in her career. A code sequence appeared flashing red at the base of the screen, classified Omega. Strand match found, restricted archive signature blinking on the lower corner. She had never seen an Omega classification in a live subject. It was a marker for anomaly, one that matched the hidden vault of pre-expansion DNA, thought to belong to a lost species wiped out during the Great Collapse. But here it was, living, breathing, laughing, walking in the streets of Earth. Cross was not just human, he was something older, something awakened. Serex's hands trembled slightly as she unlocked the next level of data. Warnings flashed on the console, alerting her that Council authority would be notified if she continued. But she ignored them. She needed to know. The visual frame lit up with ancient symbols, some she could not even translate fully. And in the center of it all was an evolutionary chart that showed a humanoid species branching out into multiple paths. One of them led to humans, the others ended in fire. The humans were not the weakest, they were the most adaptable, designed to rebuild, to regenerate, to push through limits over time, to develop endurance so great that it could survive isolation, stress, climate shift, and even relentless physical cycles without collapsing. They were not chaotic by accident, they were chaotic by design, and that chaos was a hidden strength. Her heart pulsed with strange speed, her breath shallow, even though she did not need to breathe in this form. She now understood why her people feared humans, why contact had been forbidden for so long, because humans were not just young, they were unfinished, and they were evolving. She turned away from the console and stared out the curved window toward Earth, blue and calm from a distance. But below, a force slept that none of the other galactic species were prepared to face. Meanwhile, down on the surface, Drayan sat in his lab typing notes into a private archive, his thoughts distracted by the woman he had met. Her voice, her presence, her eyes, they did not match her story. Something about her felt engineered, not in a bad way, but in a way that made him feel studied, not seen. He brought up security logs from the communication tower near the park and filtered infrared data from the time she arrived. And what he saw froze him. A small pulse of heat in the air, a silver object descending through clouds for a second. Too smooth, too quiet, and then gone. He leaned forward and scanned the image again. The shape matched nothing in Earth's registry. What the hell, he whispered to himself. He cross-checked her energy signature from the brief contact they shared using a portable wrist reader that silently recorded biosignals, and what he saw was impossible. Her signal was dual-layered, one organic, one artificial. No human had that kind of output, not unless they were something else. Drayan stood from his chair, his heart pounding, not from fear but from realization. She was not a stranger, she was not from Earth, and somehow his own body had known it even before his mind did. Back aboard the Xanthari ship, Seruxa paced the corridor as a silent alert appeared across her neural link. Council transmission incoming. She knew what it would say. She had broken the boundaries. Her scan had triggered a flag. She was no longer just an observer now. She was a risk. The transmission opened with the cold voice of High Auditor. This car, your actions have compromised the mission. You are to return immediately and prepare for genetic erasure of the subject before further contamination occurs. She did not respond. Instead, she closed the panel and walked to the exit bay. She would not return. She would not erase what she had seen or what she had. Tushi Drayan was not a mistake. He was a message, and she was no longer a scientist. She was part of the experiment. Now discovery of the forbidden file. The night above Earth was silent, but inside the walls of Drayan's private research dome, the silence was alive with questions, the kind that burned inside the bones and refused to sleep. He moved quickly from panel to panel, bypassing basic systems and filtering past his usual scans. Tonight, he was not working on planetary models or surface simulations. Tonight, he was chasing a truth that had been growing in the corners of his mind since the moment he looked into that woman's eyes. He had traced her presence using a hidden layer of sensors he once built to test cloaking algorithms. Most scientists would not even think to scan at this level, but Drayan was not most scientists. What he found was not just strange, it was deliberate predation, patterns to clean for Earth, made plasma vibrations in the air that lasted milliseconds longer than natural. And then there was the drop signature, a heat trail leading straight from upper orbit to the park where they first met. She did not arrive. She landed. His fingers moved with instinct over the controls. He had stored multiple encrypted entries from his wearable biosensor since the first time she touched him, and he had finally cracked the format. Beneath them was an embedded sequence, something too smooth, too perfect, to be biological. It was a coded implant signal. Someone had marked him here. Opened the encrypted channel again, now with his own modified decryption keys, and what came pouring out of the file was not a human language. It was alien symbols, rotating with layered meaning, genetic sequences. Side by side with foreign notations, one word kept repeating, Omega, 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 followed by the phrase, vital anomaly. It was clear now. He was not being watched. He was being tested across the city. Sarixa stood in the ruins of an old abandoned data relay tower. She had found it on one of her early scans, a place humans had forgotten, a place now used to send messages without interference. Her fingers hovered over the glowing panel, carved from alien crystal, not built here, but carried centuries ago by those who came before. She sent a coded pulse into the Zenthari archive, not to obey, but to search, and her eyes scanned the flood of files with speed beyond any human mind. She was looking for the project connected to Drayan's DNA, and when she found it, her form went still. The file was old, buried so deep it had not been accessed. For over 600 galactic cycles, it belonged to a forbidden group known as the Cedar Collective, a fringe faction of scientists who believed evolution should not wait for nature to act. They had scattered samples across primitive worlds with genetic potential, and Earth was one of them. Drayan's blood carried more than life, it carried intention. He was not just human. He was the spark of an experiment designed to create a new kind of sentient body, one that could repair faster, adapt deeper, and connect emotionally while sustaining constant biological output. His body was designed for balance and resilience, but hidden in that design was also a fail switch. If awakened too far too fast, his genetic core could spiral out of control. Staggered back from the panel, a weight pressing down on her synthetic chest. She had touched him. She had activated part of it. Her emotions had interfered, and now the council would see him not as a subject, but as a threat. She opened a new channel, directly to Drayan, hoping he would understand, but he had already found his own answers. He stood in front of the screen as her voice came through, not through normal comms, but on the same encrypted frequency. He had just broken you. Lied to me, he said, calmly, but his eyes held a storm. I tried to follow orders, Sarixa answered, but what I found changed everything. You studied me, like an animal. Came here to learn, and I did more than I expected. You could have told me from the beginning, and would you have believed me if I had arrived and said your blood is not just yours, that you were born from something older than Earth, that your strength, your desires, your energy, your very body were built to endure and evolve beyond any other species? Would you have listened, or would you have? Rundreen said nothing for a moment. Then he stepped back from the console and looked at the reflection in the dark glass. Everything felt different now. The weight in his muscles, the clarity in his mind, the fire that had been burning since he first met her. It was all connected. He was changing, and the question was not whether he wanted to anymore. It was whether he could stop. Sarixa watched the monitor as the alert flared red across her interface. Command had locked her out. She was now marked as compromised. The ship would be coming for both of them, she whispered into the calm. I know what they plan to do, and I will not let them erase. Udrian looked up, his voice low. Then come here now, we finish this together. Outside the stars burned brighter than before, but not with peace. They burned with the fire of awakening. The council orders elimination. The central chamber of the Zenthari High Council hung above the Shadow Sea on a black floating citadel, supported by coils of gravity chains that pulsed with blue light, each link encoded with laws of the stars. The council members sat around a ring of silence, their expressions unreadable, their eyes glowing with the judgment of 1,000 years. In the center of the chamber, a large projection displayed Serex's latest unauthorized scans of the human subject. Drayon crossed the data glowed with dangerous potential: heart rate recovery time, tissue regeneration, synaptic link stability, and most of all, the Omega anomaly signature expanding across his cellular matrix like a signal waking from deep sleep. Elder Troll leaned forward, his voice echoing with the force of old authority. This cannot continue. The Omega line was never to be reawakened. It was buried for a reason, whispered another member. We knew this day might come, muttered one of the few science elders who still remembered the Cedar Collective and the fire they lit before vanishing into exile. This human is already beyond phase, one said. Troll, if left unchecked, he could enter Cascade. Then one voice rose that had not spoken for years. It belonged to Elder Vera, a council member once known for her work in empathy research. Her words were soft but cut through the room like cold wind. And what if Cascade is not destruction? What if it is the next step? The others turned toward her with expressions that showed no agreement. Do you suggest we let this thing evolve? Do you forget what happened to the Viren experiments? That Flame Cities, the collapse of Arden, is not a weapon, Vera replied. He is a bridge. He is unstable, shouted another end, the one who triggered this instability. Serexa must be dealt with, said Trolf. Judgment came without Della. Serexa was to be eliminated for breach of protocol and emotional contamination, and Drayon Cross was to be removed before full Omega expansion could occur across the stars on Earth. The night moved slowly through clouds in silence, but inside the old research facility now, sealed and hidden in the mountains, Drayon stood facing the holographic interface left behind by Serexa, her voice repeating warnings and fragmented messages. They are coming. They have marked you are now a signal, and they will not let you moved through the facility like someone who had stopped being surprised days ago. His thoughts sharper, his memories unfolding faster. He had activated systems with only a glance, opened encrypted files with handprints that once triggered nothing. He was not afraid anymore. He was becoming something else behind him. Serexa stepped into the room covered in dust and light, her breathing slow, her movements cautious. She carried no scanner, no weapon, just her presence. They will send hunters, she said. Them come, he replied, his voice without doubt. You don't understand what the council will do. They see you as an infection, a variable that cannot be predicted. They will wipe this entire sector if they think you will survive long enough to awaken fully. Then we cannot run, he said. We fight or we end. Right. Serexa moved closer, her hands almost trembling, something she never knew was possible. She had touched the data, she had seen the outcomes, she knew the risks, and yet none of that could stop what she felt now. Not logic, not fear, not order. Sif, you go further, Serexa said. There is no going back. Drayon turned and looked at her, not with anger, not even confusion, but something deep, something full of knowing. I was never meant to go back. In the high skies above Earth, the Zenthari assault vessel sliced through the wet glass, its weapons charged with silent power inside. It stood the council's execution team. No emotions, no doubts, just order. Serex's communicator flared a live warning. Beacon detected, incoming force, estimated arrival in minutes not hours. Reached toward the main core of the old Cedar lab. The console opened without resistance, and for the first time in recorded time, a human placed their hand into the Omega lock without pain, without rejection. The system pulsed once, then again, and the chamber began to hum. You are activating it, Serexa said, her voice full of both awe and terror. Drayon nodded. It was never about power. It was about preparation, about becoming the thing they never wanted us to be. Outside, the ground shook as the assault vessel hovered above the facility, its cannons glowing with light. The team deployed silently, shadows with armor made of silence. Their target, not a building, not a weapon, but a man inside the chamber. Drayon stood still as the lights surrounded him, not burning but building. He could feel every atom in the air, every piece of code in the old structure, every vibration in Serex's voice. The Council watches now. She said they see you as flame then. Let them burn, he whispered down. Then the sky exploded. Devolution ignited. The mountain shook like the heart of a planet being cracked open. Thunder rolled, not from the clouds, but from the ground itself, as light burst upward from the cedar core, swallowing the sky in golden waves above the facility. The Zenthari vessel trembled under impact, its structure groaning, its stealth field collapsing under a force it could not measure. Drain stood in the eye of it all, his body wrapped in energy that had no heat, no sound, just pulse. His skin shimmered with shifting light, not metal, not flame, not aura, but something new. His bones had grown stronger, his nerves faster, his mind split into hundreds of layers, each one working in perfect harmony. His breath moved like a storm, but he was still calm. Sarexa watched from behind the shield wall, hands clenched, eyes wide. This was not a weapon being born, this was balance. This was the awakening of a design hidden under generations of evolution. She saw no violence in him, no hunger for power, only direction. A storm that knew exactly where it was going. The Zenthari strike team landed outside, moving without hesitation, elite hunters with armor that bent light and minds, conditioned to erase emotion, each one trained for planetary cleanouts. The lead unit raised its gauntlet and marked the structure for detonation inside. Drayan turned his head slowly toward Sarexa. They are here, she nodded, her voice low. You can still leave through the side ridge, escape with the old tunnels. No, he said, this is not a moment to run from. He stepped forward, the door opening before he touched it. As if the structure itself now listened to his heartbeat, the wind hit his face, carrying dust and static. His eyes locked onto the first wave of incoming soldiers. The moment the Zenthari saw him, their sensors overloaded, pulses of unknown signature flooded their screens, their weapons jammed for a second, then rebooted with emergency override codes. He raised his hand not to attack, but to redirect the incoming shock rounds, curved away as if space itself refused to let him be touched. The soldiers hesitated, but only for a moment, then they charged. Drayan moved. He did not fight like a man, he moved like thought, his body bending around, attacks slipping through energy blasts, not with speed but with flow. Every strike he made dropped an attacker, without death, without blood, only silence. Sarexa stepped into the fight beside him, using her own precision to disable key targets. Her body moved with sharp lines, her strikes exact, but her eyes never left him. Not once. She had studied wars, read about legends, but never seen harmony like this. The assault team faltered their ranks, breaking. Their leader screamed commands that no longer mattered above them. The command ship charged its planetary cannon, ready to level the mountain, to erase the subject no matter the cost. Drayan looked up and reached, not with his hand but with something else. His mind stretched toward the energy of the sky and the clouds bent around. His focused, the cannon fired light fell toward the earth like divine punishment. Drayan stood taloned, the light never reached him. It shattered in the air as if hitting a mirror that was never built. The mountain shook again, and the Zenthari ship lost control, spiraling away into the ocean's silence, fell broken only by the wind. The strike team surrendered without words, their helmets removed, their eyes filled with something they had not known since training began. Doubt. Drayan turned back to Sarexa, his energy fading into his skin like a tide returning to the deep, his voice low but unshaken. This is not the end. She stepped closer than ever before, her hand reaching for his face, not to scan, not to measure, but to feel, and she whispered, "Then what comes now?" He looked into her eyes and spoke, not like a scientist, not like a soldier, but like someone who had finally remembered who he truly was. "Now we tell them, now we show them what they tried to bury deep in the stars." The Zenthari Council watched the footage in silence, screens flickering, data unreadable, their finest team erased, their ship destroyed, their target evolved. They had not stopped the anomaly, they had completed it. Some called for a second strike, others called for retreat, but one voice broke the Council's silence. Farah spoke again. "Let the galaxy see what happens when fear fails. Let them see what happens when evolution chooses its own Tima. New species is born." The sun rose slowly over the mountain ridges, lighting the earth with quiet warmth, as if nature itself had paused to witness something ancient, finally fulfilled. The battlefield was silent, now scattered with broken armor, cracked stone and smoke that no longer burned. The wind carried no cry of war, only the deep breath of Servi. Valdrian stood near the cliff's edge where the cedar facility had once hidden in silence. Now it pulsed with soft golden light, like a heart reborn. The air around him shimmered lightly, but he no longer glowed with the wild energy of before. The storm inside him had settled, not gone, not suppressed, but mastered. He looked stronger, yes. his muscles shaped by a balance of force and purpose, but it was his eyes that carried the most change they no longer searched for, meaning they carried it. Serexa walked beside him, not as an observer, not as an outsider, but as something more. Her human form had softened in detail, her movements now smoother, her voice now lighter. She had not just studied humanity, she had tasted it, and in doing so something inside her had changed. The Zenthari had not returned, the council had gone silent. Their threats pulled back into the stars where fear still ruled, but Earth had awakened now, and with it came a question that could not be ignored. What comes next? They did not need to answer it with speeches, they built it instead together. Serexa and Drayan established the first Union research colony built on old cedar ground, but forged from both human and alien knowledge. They invited not just humans but those Zenthari who had defected during the battle, those who had seen something more than danger in the Omega Awakening. They called it the Cross Line, a reference not only to Drayan's name but to what he represented, a crossing between species, a bridge between old fear and new potential. Children were born under open sky, children whose blood carried the resilience of Earth and the precision of the stars. They ran through the valley with eyes that glowed faintly at night and hearts that never feared the unknown. They were the first generation of something never designed yet fully real. Drain became a leader not of armies, not of governments, but of balance. He trained others, helped them understand what it meant to live with a body built for more than endurance, to carry a mind that could shape environments with focus, to feel so deeply that emotion itself became a source of strength, not weakness. He never asked to be chosen, but he chose every day to lead by standing beside, not in front. Serexa became the voice of truth, her records, once written for science, now told in stories to young minds, her voice calm and rich with experience. She no longer feared the unknown because she had fallen into it and found life. One evening under the twin moons, Drayan stood before a gathering of old allies, young students and new explorers, and he told the story of how it began, not with power, not with conflict, but with a single question: how do humans survive such intensity, such connection, such endless drive without breaking? He looked out across the field where light beasts danced in the tall grass, where children with hybrid eyes played among trees that pulsed with cedar growth, and he said, we were never built to break, we were built to bend, adapt and rise again. We were built to outlast, and now you are built to reach further than we ever did. The people around him stood in silence, not because they were unsure what to say, but because they felt something too big for words. Serexa stood beside him and whispered softly so only he could hear, I once thought you were a mistake, and now, he replied, you know, I am a beginning. She smiled and placed her hand on his. Above them, the stars continued to move, but Earth no longer looked up with silence. Earth now pulsed with its own story, a story born from fire, from mystery, from unity. The records of the Zenthari, the cross line, became classified as uncontainable but not dangerous. They marked it with a single phrase: species ascended. And on the final page of Serex's private log, written in a language no longer used by her people, she wrote a single truth: a species that can mate 365 days a year without breaking, without losing feeling, without forgetting. Love is not primitive, it is limitless. And so the story ends, not with a battle, not with a death, but with a choice to become something new, to rise without fear, to live fully and fiercely, to be more than what they were told to be human. The end, you said. Now, write final last part, more unique, without dots, with the end lines. ChatGPT said. Of course, Sony, here is the final last part, written in third person, simple English, unique, powerful, emotional, no dots, no short lines, ending with the end lines exactly how you want it. The stars were quiet now, not because the galaxy had stopped moving, but because it had paused to watch what Earth had become above the clouds. The old Zenthari war satellites no longer scanned the surface with caution. They now floated in silence, their systems no longer seeing a threat but something they had no name. Fordrain stood on the highest ridge of the Cedar Valley, the wind brushing past him like a friend from another life, his body stronger than it had ever been, his heart quieter, his breath steady, not because the storm had left him but because he had learned how to carry it without letting it consume him. Beside him, Serexa stood, wearing no disguise, no mask, no protocol. She had shed the last layer of her old purpose, now fully present as something new, not alien, not human, something balanced. Her eyes had changed, no longer glowing with artificial scan but alive with emotion. Below them, the land glowed with life, vines wrapped around crystal towers, Children ran barefoot across fields that were once sterile, their laughter mixing with the hum of nature, and light beasts danced around them with curiosity instead of fear. They were not born from labs, they were born from choice, from union, from trust. No council ruled this place, no empire gave it a name. It named itself through every heartbeat, through every shared breath between species once divided by fear, now joined by future. Adrian looked across the horizon where the sky touched the sea, and saw no end, only possibility. They tried to stop us, he said, not to her, not to the sky, but to the memory of everything that tried to cage him, to the voices that called him a mistake, to the hands that marked him. Anomalous Arexa reached for his hand and he did not flinch. They stood there like roots planted in the soil of both worlds, their silence stronger than any them. The stars slowly moved, and for the first time in known memory, Earth glowed back, not with weapon light, not with burning fuel, but with presence. And somewhere far beyond, in a chamber that once ruled with fear, a message blinked once on an old, forgotten console. It read only this: they have not broken, they have become. And in the valley below, where children with hybrid eyes built their own games and wrote their own rules, a young girl asked her teacher how it all began, and the teacher smiled and answered, it started when someone asked, how can they survive so much? How can they endure so long? How do they love so deeply and never fall apart? And the truth is, they never needed permission, they only needed time. The end.